So you mentioned Continental Bank. So let's move to the years you spent there. Talk about that a little bit. And was there a major challenge that occurred during your time with the bank?
Well, Continental Bank, reminiscent of what's happening today, Continental Bank was the first large bank that failed. In fact, at the time, it was the third largest bank in the United States. It failed. The federal government, sound familiar, felt that if Continental Bank failed, the entire financial industry would crash internationally. It was that big a thing. So the FDIC basically took it over, owned all of the stock. The stockholders were disenfranchised to the point where the last stockholder meeting that was held actually had a metal detector at the door. The old board was so afraid of what they might do. So I came in with a new team, basically after it failed, the idea being put it back into public hands, build the bank up, and frankly, if we could find it a partner to dance with, find it a partner. And we did. Got all of the stock back into public hands. When I got there, the stock was selling at $2.50, and the federal government owned it. When we left, it was selling at $55, and the public owned it. Not a bad story. So it was an interesting time. Probably the most interesting story out of that was when Tom Theobald called his top staff in, the chairman, and said, every one of you has to buy stock in this bank equal to 4 times your annual salary. You cannot take a loan, no stock options, and if you sell it, you must leave the company. And there are no guarantees the stock will go up or down, but you need to commit yourself to the company. I mortgaged my house, as did others. And as one fellow said as he walked out the door after that, he says, it really does tend to focus your mind. It changed the culture of the bank, because until that day, if you had a great person working for you and some other department wanted them, you'd hold them back. After that day, you'd give them to them. It changed, it blew up the silos in an instant. And obviously has been copied by a lot of companies since then.
You've received a lot of awards and honors. Can you identify which one was most important to you and tell us why?
I mean, clearly the most important honor I ever got was to be in the Hall of Fame for Arthur Page. I mean, it's your own peers telling you that you know, not necessarily that they liked you or didn't like you, but that you did good work, and that you had given something back to the profession. You had created a body of knowledge. Hands down, Arthur Page Society. The most interesting stuff is, as an old retread, silver-backed PR guy, to end up on a couple of boards, as I am now at the New York Stock Exchange at FINRA, amazes me. I'm constantly amazed that people who have a depth of experience in these fields, I mean, people that used to be the head of the SEC and the presidents of colleges and all these other people on the board would let an old retread in and actually listen. So it says something about the profession. I'm not sure it says much about me. I happen to be standing in the right place when some of these things happened. But there are other people in the profession that are getting that kind of recognition, which historically we never had. There weren't a lot of PR people on boards or other than charitable boards. So I think it says something about what this profession is and where it's going. But, you know, Arthur Page Society, how do you not think that's pretty cool?
Just to clarify, you talked about the stock exchange and the board that you're on. Just clarify what that is. You gave us an acronym.
Okay. Well, what I'm involved in now, late in life, is I have for about the last 10 years, I've run the Individual Investors Advisory Board at the New York Stock Exchange. Hanging around there, and by the way, my first job coming out of high school was a runner on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And 50 years later, I'm sitting in the boardroom for what is called New York Stock Exchange Regulation. It's a separate company. It regulates the New York Stock Exchange, and I'm on that board, and then there's a board called FINRA, which used to be NASD, which is now the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, which regulates all of the brokerage firms in the country, and now the SEC. But the fact that they'd let me go do that is, I think, it's great fun. It's very rewarding, and probably has a lot to do with the experiences someone in PR had, because we've been, when things go wrong, we've been there. And we somehow have some sense of how to prevent that from happening again, or how to deal with it if it happens again.
Interesting circle you've gone through.
I have had an amazing life so far. And when I figure out what I want to do when I grow up, it's going to be pretty neat.
You've mentioned some things. Looking back over your career, for what accomplishments are you most proud, and why?
Okay, the thing that I think all of us should be most proud of in a long career is sort of what we've done as far as mentoring other people. I mean, I go to the Arthur Page meetings, and I look around, and I can count 7 to 10 people in that place who have worked for me, who are now running their own organizations, probably doing better than I ever would with those companies. But I had something to do with them doing that. I get emails from students who 10 years ago I had in a class at Northwestern who were saying, something just happened and I did what you told me and it worked. I mean, there's nothing better than that. That's what it's really all about. It's the giving back and creating something for the profession through real people. There are little things that have happened in companies that you take great pride in. I mean, once at United Airlines, for example, I had been there about a month and a half and got a call from 2020. They said, we'd like to do a story. Planes, basically at that time, there were a series of accidents. And the issue was planes are falling out of the air. We'd like to come out and look at your safety session out in San Francisco, where you do maintenance and how your safety works. And I went into the president and he said, he says, we do safety, we don't talk about it. And I said, Dick, we really somebody's got to do this story because people are getting worried about planes. And basically, it was a bet your job. So we had 2020 came out, and we made two arrangements with 2020. We said, you can come out to the San Francisco base, but you have to spend a week there. You can't come in for a day. You got to spend a week. You got to really understand it. And before you leave, you've got to interview with the in-house United Airlines employee publication as to what you found and how you felt about our safety. They came out, they spent a week. I mean, and it was a no-brainer because the safety out there, you would see mechanics with a dental pick inside a 747 picking at a spot of rust that you couldn't see. I mean, you felt so safe after going through it. And I figure so they spend a week there. They interview. Barbara Walters comes out to do the final story, who, how should I say this? Barbara Walters, as a journalist, is a great actor. They plugged a earphone in her ear, and a guy stood in the back and told her what to ask, and she would ask, and one of our people would return. Well, anyway, the show started with Barbara Walters sitting in an empty plane saying, planes been falling out of there. We've asked every airline if they would show us their safety and their maintenance base, and everybody turned us down except United Airlines. And I must tell you, I have never felt so safe in my life. I wondered whether I had a job the next day. The show went on at 9 o'clock at night in Chicago, and I sat there in my house telling Kathleen we may not have a job tomorrow morning. At 9:10, the phone rang, and it was the head of the San Francisco customer relations, because all of the reservation stuff moves west at night. He says, our phones have lit up. He says, everybody's changing their reservations at any cost from any airline to ours. I hung up the phone and said, we have a job. Yeah. But, again, it was a good story, well told. But you occasionally have to take a deep breath and be able to tell it. But you know, as one little thing, that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.